Florida Congressman Ted Yoho sat down with Americans for Limited Government's Rick Manning to discuss his first year in office and reflect upon Obamacare and other issues he has faced.
Tell me a little bit about, you decided to run for Congress. What made you want to run for Congress?
What got into me? Yeah. I don't know. Just being a person in business for the last 30 years and grew up with, conservative American values and grew up in Pompano to where we were able to go to school, take advantage of the opportunity in this country. And my wife and I, we got married at an early age, 19, and we just went to work. We took advantage of that opportunity that becomes the American dream. And there's so many stories out there of that, but we saw that disappearing. And I had an awakening personally probably about 12 years ago about our government and the direction of our country. Just felt it was going in the direction I wasn't comfortable with, and I wasn't the only one who felt that way. And I got looking around at chronic problems that politicians typically talk about, but they never fix. The proverbial kick the can down the road. Whether it was immigration, our debt, foreign policy, energy independence. They talked about that. In fact, one of the person I ran against, I heard in a radio interview one morning saying that when I came to Washington 18 years ago, we started working on an energy policy so America could be energy independent. And it just dawned on me, it's the same story over and over again. And the only way you're going to change Washington is to send people up here that aren't up here for a job. They're up here for a cause. And that cause was for our country, and preserving, our founding principles, core values, and I think the Constitution's a good roadmap to follow.
Excellent. Today, talking a little bit about Obamacare, which is obviously on everybody's mind.
Yes,
the rollout's been an unmitigated
really
disaster. It's been a disaster. Not just the website, but the pools of applicants are skewing too old. There's delays in the employer mandate now. There's a call for delay in the individual mandate. Even Bill Clinton's saying it ought to be delayed now. Can you talk something about these problems and how you think they may affect the next election cycle?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Bill Clinton's speaking out about it. I wonder who he's promoting. We ran on getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. I saw it as the wrong way for our government to go, meaning that the government stepping in and says, we'll provide the health care for you. It's not your responsibility. And it's getting away from, again, our founding principles, free markets, free enterprise, fiscal responsibility, and personal responsibility. The government stepping in says, it's all right, we'll take care of that. We saw this as a disaster. I saw it as the #1 job-killing bill in America. And that's not just based on me. That's as we were campaigning for the last 3.5 years, 2 years before I ran. We would talk to the business owner. Again, going back to the American dream, if you could reach, start over again, could you reach the same level of success? And they said, absolutely not. The Affordable Care Act kept coming up, and they said that's the #1 job-killing bill. That's keeping them from expanding because of the uncertainty. And so we saw this looming, and then you hear people like Max Baucus, one of the authors, said it's a train wreck waiting to happen. And so I ran on defunding, burying the Affordable Care Act to get it away, just to bring that certainty back to the American economy. I still feel the same way about that. And if you look at what we did before the government got shut down, the Democratic shutdown is what I like to talk about, because we sent them over 4 packages that they wouldn't even negotiate on. We went from a full repeal of the Affordable Care Act to a 1-year delay for everybody. And then it was a 1-year individual delay of the mandate. And it was the same thing as the president was giving to over 1,600 special interest groups, big businesses, big unions, and they wouldn't negotiate on that because we saw this happening, and now we're here, and I think there's a lot of buyer's remorse. And I hope the American people hold everybody accountable that supported that bill. And I mean, that's really what they need to do if they're fed up with that. And go back to the very beginning, in 2008, 2009, the report said that there was approximately 15% of our population didn't have insurance. 85% of this country already had insurance through their employer or self-insured. They're paying for it on their own. So just from a common sense or business standpoint, instead of messing with the 85% that are doing well, focus on 15%. We've got the inverse of that now. The reports I'm reading now are saying there's going to be 135 million people lose their health insurance. And it's just it's just wrong. And then the accountability of the chief executive of our country telling lies to the American people, and this is all going to come out. Knowing that they were going to lose their insurance back in 2009 and 2010, and they went on with this plan. And I think more egregious than that is go how that bill was passed. It was passed through a Democratic Congress, a Democratic House. It was not open for debate. There was no markup on it, so there was no Republican input. They just said, no, we got the majority, we don't need you. And they pushed that bill through like that. And then the infamous words of the then Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass it to see what's in it. We have to pass it to see how it's going to work. I think that's legislative malpractice. I think the government ought to be held accountable for that. And there's just so many things that are coming out of that. It's just like the navigators signing people up, and the report today was saying that there's definitely a high level of security breach to the American public on their identity. And I mean, this is wrong. For our government to come out with a plan like this and then say, you're stuck with this plan, this is your choice. To me, this is the worst piece of legislation I have ever seen our country come out with.
Now, you stood firm in terms of trying to defund, in terms of trying
I'll
to
do whatever I can to get rid of that bill.
And do you think that is do you regret that decision to say, this is so egregious that we need to stop this bill?
No, absolutely not. Again, go back that I ran on getting rid of that. I got elected on that by 65% of the population. They sent me up here to get rid of that. So I stood strong on that. And, I just got back from the district, and the majority of the people said, we love where you're standing, stay strong, don't give in. So, no, I'll continue to do that. The voters will decide if I was right or wrong in November of 2014.
Now, on a different front, but almost as astonishing, we had 2 9/11s ago, we had Benghazi.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're still sitting there trying to figure out what happened, being stonewalled. Why do you think the press is paying so little attention to the Benghazi story, which is just, and so many people feel is malfeasance at its just
I
core.
agree. Well, you'd have to go talk to the press of why they're doing that. I have my own feelings, and I think they're in bed with the Democratic Party with an agenda. The Benghazi story, I mean, it's unique in that we had 4 servicemen killed without any retaliation, without any trying to go in there and save them. We had an administration denying. At first, they came out and said it was terror. In the first couple hours, they said it was a terrorist attack. Then they squelched that and put that under the rug, and came out and said it was that silly YouTube video of the Muslim world and depicting Muhammad in a bad light. And we know that was false. But yet they went on national TV for 2.5 weeks going over this story and trying to build credibility. And then the whole time they were losing credibility to the point that they had to come out and admit it was a terrorist attack, which we all knew from the beginning. And it was on 9/11. I mean, the reports that we've seen on our foreign affairs said they knew ahead of time that this was possibly going to happen. There's so many reports out there juxtaposed to the administration's position that they need to be held accountable. And I think it goes, if we go beyond that, what does this mean to the American government? You've got, when Hillary Clinton says, what difference does it make? I was there that day, and I'll tell you the difference it makes. You've got 4 families that will never see their father, brother, son, cousin, or uncle come home. You've got the credibility of the United States on the line. If we can't trust our own government on telling us the truth, how can we ever expect another nation to trust us? And I think you're seeing a perfect example of that, how it plays out in the Middle East right now, how it's playing out in Germany with the NSA spying. I mean, we've got all these things that are going on, and it comes from a lack of leadership at the very top. That's the president.
Well, and on the NSA spying, the press is obviously treating that a little bit differently because a lot of it was directed at the press
Well,
itself.
they're a little sensitive about that.
So they are a little sensitive. But how do you see that affecting trade, international trade, in terms of the willingness of nations to partner with the United States and trust us to be fair and good partners?
We'll go back to the words of George Washington. You should have open trade and commerce with all nations, honest friendship with all nations, entanglement with none. You can't have those kind of relationships if you're out there spying, and everybody says all governments do that. Well, they might, but we got caught. And then you have the lies, and the lack of credibility of this administration. I've never seen anything like it, from Benghazi to the red line in Syria. There is a red line. No, there wasn't a red line. I didn't draw a red line. The world drew the red line. We all heard what he said. This is not about regime change. Oh, yeah, he's got to go. He said that, and then he says he denied that. Their whole foreign policy is off track, and so I find it real hard for anybody to trust what's coming out of this administration. I mean, look at what happened in Egypt with Morsi. By definitions of Webster's dictionary, that was a coup. Yet our government refuses to call it a coup because of the ramifications they'd have to cut foreign aid according to our laws. And I think had we done that in the beginning and stood up and said, we're going to cut foreign aid, they would have come to the table. So wait a minute, don't be so rash. Let's talk this out. We can settle this. And we could have done that with Benghazi if we had swift attacks or swift countermeasures. The NSA, come forth right with that information and saying, yeah, we did do this, we're going to stop. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild our credibility in not just in the United States of America, but around the globe for our allies.
Well, and on that trade front, a little bit different area, you've championed an interesting concept that Americans for Limited Government has supported, and we've been working on it for the past year, and is pushing for reforming U.S. sugar policy.
Yep.
And looking for a third way to deal with sugar policy. And it's essentially, by first addressing foreign subsidies, essentially creating a subsidy ceasefire. And then, can you tell us a little bit about your Zero for Zero sugar trade policy idea?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great concept because what we have is we have our domestic sugar producers, and they do a great job. I mean, our sugar producers, in fact, our American farmers will outproduce anybody in the world. I'm convinced of that. I'm a little bit biased in that, being around ag since I was about 16. But they're competing on a world market that is heavily subsidized. And you've got Mexico the government of Mexico owns 20% of the sugar production in Mexico. Brazil heavily subsidizes their sugar market. Yeah, and Brazil accounts for over 50% of the world's sugar exports. And if we were to put our farmers at a disadvantage by getting rid of the program we have, they would go out of business. We would be indebted to a foreign nation, dependent on another foreign nation. And we tried that with oil back in the 70s. We found out it didn't work so well for us. We don't ever want to do that with any of our agricultural products. But getting back to sugar, the concept is this. Our sugar producers and the United States government would be willing to go to a zero-sum game. That means there is no price support from the U.S., and they would compete on a world market provided all other countries stop subsidizing their sugar producers. The European Union tried this they tried just to get rid of their sugar industry pretty much and let the free market work in there, and they pulled out their price supports. Their sugar industry collapsed domestically, and now they're beholden to the world sugar producers, which is a very fluctuating and not a very stable market from a supply side, and it can be manipulated. But in the process, they wound up closing down over 80 mills. They've lost over 140,000 jobs, and we don't want that to happen here. Our goal as government should be to make America stronger and more competitive in the world with as little influence from our American government as possible. Just open it up to where the rules apply to everybody equally. And if we do that, we've talked to a lot of the sugar producers. They would love it if we could help get rid of the world subsidy. So that's our goal.
What kind of reception have you received here on the Hill for the approach?
I think overall we've received a lot of support on that. We get more and more people, are interested in that. And of course, in the states domestically here, you have the sugar producers, and then you have the processors. And they're always clamoring about the cost of sugar. Yeah, our sugar prices were a little higher, but they've dropped to historic lows. And since 2002 to 2010, the cost of that program to the American taxpayers has been zero.
What's your got a farm bill that's going to be going through, I presume, at some point. Do you plan on continuing to pursue this as a unique way to try to solve this kind of problem, or does it go away if the farm bill goes away?
I think well, if it goes away, we're going to be indebted and beholden to these other sugar-producing countries. I don't want it to go away. I want it to go away where other countries stop the subsidies, so our farmers are at a fair advantage, or not advantage, but they're competing on the same field, level playing field. But on the Farm Bill altogether, there's so many programs that the government's in that we'd rather get out. One of them is the milk program. You know, I talk to producers and processors. Not one of them can really explain the program. And then I came back to them and I said, would you feel better if the federal government was out of it? And they said, if you can get the government out of it, we'd be a lot happier. So I think a lot of these programs need to be looked at and put a sunset clause in there. And then when that clause expires, if you're the producer or the processor, you come to us and say, we need this for this reason, and present the case to Congress, and then Congress can say, we'll do it again, but it'll be a sunset, 2 to 3 years. The role is to get government out of as much of our lives as we can. And again, I ran on limited government, fiscal responsibility, free enterprise, personal responsibility.
One last question. You've been in Congress for almost a year. And what surprised you?
I had hair when I came here. What surprised me? I think the biggest thing that surprised me was a lack of a cohesive vision for this country and a direction we should move into. I see too much party politics and bickering that is dividing our country. And I think probably the biggest thing it comes down to is, what is the role of the federal government? It's spelled out very concisely in the Constitution, and we've become way bigger than we were supposed to be. And to try to get people to agree on that, where do you start paring back, is the thing I thought would be a little bit easier to do, but I haven't seen that yet. And again, if we go back to developing a vision for this country, what America should be, what it should stand for, and the direction of how to get there, you'll pull people together, and that's our goal from our office. And we hope to do that and bring other people with us.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Anything else I want to talk about?
When you wake up in the morning, what's the thing you want to, every single day that you want to get done when you're here?
I want to see America get back on track. I want to get us back. I grew up in the Ronald Reagan years. I remember John Kennedy. I remember our country achieving greatness. We're sliding in the other direction. You look at our testing scores in our students. We've dropped down. America used to be the best at everything we did, pretty much. That was the impression. But we're not anymore. All you have to do is look at our reading, math, and science scores. We're down. We're way down in the list of things. If we're going to regain our competitive edge, we have got to focus on some policies. And that's a limited government policy, fiscal responsibility from the federal government side, because we're becoming entrapped by our indebtedness and the interest payments. And that's going to stifle growth, economic growth, and it's going to limit what government can really do. We should be out there. I was out at a Veterans Day event yesterday, and I can't tell you how many veterans came up to me and just says, I don't know what's happening to my country. It doesn't stand for what it used to stand. And I know with time things change, but the basics and the founding principles, our core values, and our constitutional principles should never change. Those are the very bedrock of this country. And if you weaken that, it's like weakening the foundation of a building. That building will come down over time. I think it's our responsibility and duty to always make sure the foundation for this country is there for the next generation and the generation 100 years from now. And that America should always stand for the land of liberty, freedoms, and the land of opportunity. And so when I wake up in the morning, how can we do that? What can we do? In fact, my wife and I, as we were going to the airport today, we were talking about, just some of the challenges. And one of the things came up about the Affordable Care Act. And the guy that was in charge of the website was talking about, and he came out and he said they kept the security issues kind of secret from him. But when he found out, he was just like, this thing is a nightmare. The security issues and the risk that puts the American taxpayer at risk is going to be a disaster. And so we're thinking, my wife and I were thinking, how can we stop stuff like this from happening in the future? And my goal is to have a bill that never comes out of the House of Representatives again that says, let's pass it to see what's in it. Let's pass it to see how it's going to work. That's just wrong. That's just wrong. And so we want to have a better government when we leave office. And if I'm honored to come back for the 8 years we pledged to run on, I will feel real good about that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, man.